There is a curious and subtle way in which we engage with the world, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. We are drawn to others not necessarily for who they are, but for what they represent to us, for the idea of who they are. This is the nature of projection. We fall in love not with the person in front of us, but with the image we have constructed of them in our minds, an image that is shaped by our desires, our unmet needs, and our inner fantasies. The real person becomes obscured, lost in the web of our projections, and we are left holding onto a version of them that doesn't exist at all. In the case of women, this phenomenon often plays out through the concept of the animus, a term Jung used to describe the inner masculine energy within a woman's unconscious mind. The animus is not just an idealized man, but a projection of all the qualities she unconsciously desires or admires in a man. These qualities, strength, confidence, intelligence, are often seen through a lens that is filtered by her own experiences, fears, and desires. In falling in love with the animus, a woman is not necessarily falling in love with the actual man standing before her, but with the projection of these qualities that she believes he embodies. This projection can create a profound disconnection between reality and fantasy. What happens when the man, as an individual, fails to meet the standards set by her inner projections? The answer is often disappointment, disillusionment, and confusion. The person she thought she was in love with, the one who represented everything she needed, turns out to be nothing more than a reflection of her own desires and expectations. This is the danger of projection. It blinds us to the truth of who others truly are, and in doing so, it prevents us from experiencing authentic connection. But projection is not limited to romantic relationships. We project onto others in every area of our lives, our family, our friends, our colleagues, and it shapes the way we perceive them. We expect others to fill roles that they never agreed to play, and when they fail to meet our expectations, we feel betrayed, misunderstood, and alienated. Yet the betrayal is not theirs. It is our own. We have projected onto them a set of ideals and expectations that have little to do with who they truly are. In order to find true connection and authenticity, we must confront these projections, strip away the fantasies, and learn to see others for who they truly are. Jung understood that the act of projection is not merely a psychological quirk, but a fundamental way in which we navigate the world. Projections are often the result of our unconscious desires and unresolved inner conflicts. We project our hopes, our fears, and our unacknowledged needs onto others, and this shapes the way we experience relationships. But in order to transcend the limitations of projection, we must first become aware of it. We must begin to understand that the way we see others is often more about us than it is about them. The image we hold of others is, in many ways, a reflection of the image we hold of ourselves. This is where the journey of self-awareness begins. Confronting our projections means recognizing the ways in which we unconsciously shape our relationships. It requires us to face the parts of ourselves that we have disowned or neglected, the aspects of our own psyche that we are projecting onto others. For women, it might mean coming to terms with the animus that shapes their perceptions of men. And for men, it might involve understanding how their inner projections of the feminine influence their relationships with women. In both cases, the path to authenticity lies in recognizing the difference between who we want others to be and who they actually are. By facing these projections, we begin to peel back the layers of illusion that cloud our relationships. We stop looking for others to fulfill the roles we have assigned to them, and we start seeing them as they truly are: complex, imperfect, and fully human. In doing so, we begin to build deeper, more authentic connections. We begin to love not the idea of a person, but the person themselves. And in this shift, we find the possibility of true intimacy, of real love, the kind that is based on understanding, acceptance, and mutual respect. In this way, the journey toward authenticity is not about finding the perfect partner, the idealized version of someone else that we have created in our minds. It is about seeing others for who they are, free from our projections, and learning to love them as they truly are. Only then can we experience the kind of love that is grounded in truth, not fantasy. Only then can we experience the freedom that comes from letting go of the need to control, to project, and to idealize. It is in this freedom, in this authenticity, that real love can be born. In the realm of human connection, there exists a deep and undeniable longing, a longing for love. But not just any love. The kind of love we're told is the answer to all our problems, the love that will heal us, make us whole, and lift us from the mundane into something extraordinary. It's the love we've been taught to seek since childhood, woven into our stories, our songs, and our very being. We were promised that love would save us, that love would complete us. And so we chase it tirelessly, desperately, thinking that in its embrace, we will finally find the peace we have been searching for. But as we journey deeper into the truth of our lives, we begin to feel a shift. A discomfort lingers. We are faced with an unsettling realization. What if love, as we've been taught to understand it, is not the saving grace we believed it to be? What if the love we seek is nothing more than an illusion, a mirage that tempts us but never fully satisfies? This illusion of love, the one we chase, is often not love at all. It is a reflection, a projection of our unmet needs. We do not seek love because we are whole. We seek it because we feel broken. We seek it because we believe we are not enough. And in our pursuit of this fantasy, we confuse desire with fulfillment. We look to others to fill the emptiness we believe resides within us. We believe that if we find the right person, the perfect lover, we will be healed. But in reality, we are simply chasing a version of love that was never meant to be, a love that comes from need, from the absence of self. True love, as Carl Jung once suggested, is not born from this kind of need. It is not something that we seek in others to complete us, nor is it something that can fill the gaps we perceive in ourselves. True love begins when we cease to need it at all. It is found in the quiet space of self-sufficiency, in the acceptance of who we are, and in the deep realization that we are already whole. This love is not a craving for external validation. It is an expression of internal wholeness. It is born when we stop seeking outside ourselves and begin to recognize the fullness that exists within. But this truth does not come without its own discomfort. To love from a place of internal completeness means to face the fact that love, as we have been conditioned to see it, was never about the other person. It was never about being rescued or saved. It was always about our own journey, our path of self-realization and growth. When we stop chasing love in the form we were taught to desire, we step onto a new path, the path of individuation. Individuation, a concept central to Jung's work, invites us to embrace all that we are, the light, the shadow, and everything in between. It calls us to let go of the masks we wear, the roles we play, the identities we cling to, and to embrace the authentic self beneath. When we accept ourselves, when we no longer need to be validated by others, we open ourselves to love that is free from expectations and free from the need to be completed. This is love in its truest form, a love that does not seek to fill us, but to celebrate our fullness. As we embark on this journey, we begin to see that the love we've been chasing was never the answer. It was a reflection of our own unmet needs, a shadow that we mistook for the light. We no longer need to seek love from the outside. We find it within. And when we do, we realize that true love that is not driven by need or longing, but by a deep sense of wholeness, is the most liberating force in the world. In the end, love is not something that can be given or taken. It is something that arises from within, from a place of self-acceptance and freedom. It is the peace that comes when we stop searching for completion, and instead recognize that we were always complete, always whole, and always worthy of love. The journey of love, then, is not one of seeking, but of remembering. It is a return to the self that has always been enough. And in that return, we find not only love, but peace, clarity, and the quiet joy that comes from being exactly who we are. In the quiet corners of our lives, where the noise of the world fades away, there lies a question that many of us are afraid to ask. Who am I really? Not the identity shaped by family expectations, societal norms, or the roles we've been assigned since birth. But who am I beyond the masks, the labels, the prescribed paths we are supposed to follow? We are constantly told what to do, how to live, who to be. The weight of others' expectations presses heavily upon us. Yet beneath this weight, there is a truth waiting to emerge. Carl Jung's concept of individuation offers us a glimpse of that truth. Individuation is the journey to become who you truly are, not who the world tells you to be, not who your parents or peers expect you to be, but who you are at your deepest core. It is the process of shedding the external layers and discovering the unique, authentic self beneath. But this journey is not easy. It requires us to break free from the expectations and projections that others place upon us. It asks us to stop seeking validation from outside, to stop waiting for permission, and instead, to make the radical choice to realize ourselves. We live in a world that constantly tells us we are not enough unless we meet certain standards. Society hands us a blueprint for success, for happiness, for love. But what if this blueprint isn't ours? What if the path we've been walking is not one of our own making, but a road paved by others? What if the very act of following this road is the thing that keeps us from discovering the truest parts of ourselves? Jung's individuation process invites us to step away from the illusions we have accepted as truths and begin the journey of self-liberation. It is a journey that begins in the silence of self-reflection, where we start to question who we have become and why. Who are we beneath the roles we play, beneath the personas we present to the world, beneath the layers of societal expectations that have shaped our every move? The path of individuation is a radical one because it asks us to trust in our own inner voice, to believe in our unique path. It is not about fitting into a mold, about living up to a certain image, or about earning the approval of others. It is about embracing the fullness of who we are, including our shadow, those parts of us that we have long rejected or overlooked. These darker aspects of ourselves, often buried deep in our unconscious, hold within them the seeds of our true strength. The shadow, Jung taught, is not something to fear, but something to integrate, to understand, and to learn from. It is the part of us that holds the keys to our wholeness. By accepting these parts of ourselves, by embracing the parts of us we have long ignored or repressed, we begin the process of individuation. We begin to break free from the projections that others have placed upon us, and we stop living for external validation. Instead, we start living for ourselves on our own terms. This is not a path of self-indulgence, but of self-realization. It is the journey of becoming whole, of rediscovering the depth and authenticity that resides within us all. And yet, this journey is not one of comfort. It is not for the faint of heart. It requires us to confront the deepest parts of ourselves, to let go of the security we find in external validation, and to trust in our own inner wisdom. It asks us to make the radical choice to step away from the expectations of others, and to trust in our own unique path. It is a path that often leads us into the unknown, into spaces where we must let go of old identities and outdated beliefs. But it is also a path that leads to freedom, the freedom to be who we truly are, without the weight of external judgment or societal approval. As we begin to live in accordance with our authentic selves, we open ourselves to a life that is uniquely our own. We no longer seek approval or validation because we no longer need it. We realize that the only approval we need is our own. And from this place of self-realization, we can begin to create a life that is truly ours, a life not defined by others but by our own choices, our own passions, and our own unique path. So, as you stand at the crossroads of your own journey, ask yourself, are you ready to make the radical choice to stop waiting for external validation? Are you ready to step away from the path that has been handed to you and create your own? The path of individuation is not for everyone, but for those who choose it. It is the path to true freedom, to authenticity, and to a life that is uniquely their own. It is a journey that begins with the courage to face yourself, to trust yourself, and to walk the path that only you can walk. The question is, will you take that first step? There is a quiet and subtle betrayal that unfolds within us, one that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. It is not the betrayal of others, but the betrayal of our very own selves. We live in a world where we are constantly told who to be, how to act, what to desire, and how to define our worth. From an early age, we are handed scripts that tell us what success looks like, what masculinity should embody, what a good life truly means. And as we grow, we begin to slip into these roles. We wear these masks as if they are our own faces, shaping ourselves into the images that others expect of us, hoping that in doing so, we will finally be accepted, loved, and valued. For many men, this is especially true. Society has given them a template of what it means to be a man, strong, stoic, unemotional, successful, and always in control. The pressure to conform to these expectations is immense. And so, they begin to wear the mask of the ideal man. They bury their vulnerability, silence their emotions, and suppress their true desires, all in the name of fitting into a mold that was never truly theirs. But in this process, something is lost. Self-betrayal occurs when we begin to prioritize external approval over our own authenticity. We become so invested in being the person we think others want us to be that we forget who we actually are. We lose sight of our true selves, the essence of who we are when we are unfiltered and unbound by societal expectations. And it is in this loss that we begin to feel the weight of an unspoken emptiness, a subtle but constant ache that whispers, "This isn't really me." The tragedy of self-betrayal is not just that we become disconnected from our true selves, but that in doing so, we sacrifice the very thing that gives our lives meaning, our authenticity. When we wear these masks, we may receive praise and validation from others, but at what cost? We may be seen and admired, but we are never truly known. We may experience success by society's standards, but it rings hollow, like an echo that never fully resonates. But here is the painful truth. In betraying ourselves for the sake of fitting in, we lose the very thing we seek most: connection. Genuine connection is born from authenticity, from being able to show up in the world as our full, unmasked selves. And yet, we continue to wear the mask because we are afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of failure, afraid of being seen for who we truly are: flawed, imperfect, and incomplete. But it is precisely in these imperfections that our humanity shines through. It is in shedding the mask, in embracing our raw, unfiltered selves, that we truly connect with others. This journey is not about erasing the mask entirely or rejecting the roles we play, but about recognizing them for what they are: temporary personas that we adopt in response to external pressures. We must learn to differentiate between the masks we wear and the selves we are underneath. This is not an easy task. It requires deep reflection, courage, and honesty. It requires us to face the fear that lies behind the mask, the fear that we are not enough, that we will not be accepted if we let down our guard. But in confronting this fear, we also open ourselves to the possibility of a deeper, more authentic connection with ourselves and others. We begin to see that we do not need to wear the mask to be loved, to be valued, or to be seen. In fact, it is only by removing the mask that we can truly be seen for who we are. And in that vulnerability, we find the freedom to finally live according to our own terms, not the terms that have been dictated to us by society. Through this process of self-discovery and authenticity, we come to realize that the real power does not lie in conformity or in meeting external expectations. The true power lies in owning our own story, in accepting our flaws and imperfections, and in showing up in the world as the truest version of ourselves. We can no longer afford to betray our own souls in the name of fitting in. It is time to take off the mask and step into the light of our own truth. So I ask you, what parts of yourself have you been hiding behind the mask? What are you afraid to show the world? And what might you discover about yourself if you allowed yourself to simply be, without the need for validation, without the fear of judgment? The journey to authenticity begins with the courage to be seen, truly seen, without pretense or disguise. And it is here in this rawness that we find our freedom. There is a place inside all of us, a shadowed corner where we hide parts of ourselves we'd rather not face. These are the parts we try to forget, the emotions we suppress, the desires we fear, the weaknesses we deny. We often call them our flaws, our dark side, and we spend much of our lives trying to avoid them, burying them deep within, hoping they will vanish if we just keep our attention elsewhere. But there is a truth that Carl Jung so profoundly articulated, that freedom does not come from running away from our darkness. It comes from confronting it. We spend so much of our lives pretending that we are something we are not. We wear masks, we play roles, we hide the uncomfortable truths about ourselves from the world, and often from ourselves. This is where the shadow lies. It is not some mythical creature lurking in the depths of our being, waiting to consume us. It is simply the parts of us we have rejected, the emotions, the impulses, the traits that we deem unacceptable or undesirable. We shove them into the unconscious, hoping they will stay hidden, but they do not. The shadow is always there, silently shaping our thoughts, our behaviors, and our lives in ways we cannot even fully comprehend. Jung believed that the shadow is not an enemy to be defeated, but a part of ourselves to be integrated. This means that true freedom, true growth, does not come from pushing away these darker parts of ourselves. It comes from facing them head-on, from acknowledging them, understanding them, and learning from them. By embracing the shadow, we free ourselves from the chains of denial and self-repression. We cease being victims of our unconscious desires, fears, and weaknesses, and instead, we begin to take ownership of them. This is the path to self-empowerment. The shadow holds within it everything we have rejected, not because it is inherently bad, but because it does not fit the image we have been taught to present to the world. It contains the parts of ourselves we consider weak, unattractive, or immoral, the anger we've never expressed, the jealousy we've never admitted, the sadness we've hidden away. But here's the paradox. These very parts of ourselves, once confronted, can become sources of strength, wisdom, and authenticity. When we integrate these aspects of ourselves, we stop running from them. We stop fearing them. And in doing so, we stop allowing them to control us from the shadows. Take, for example, the emotions we tend to deem negative: anger, fear, shame. These are often seen as obstacles to our well-being, and we go to great lengths to avoid them. But when we avoid them, we deny a part of our human experience. We suppress our ability to truly understand ourselves and others. Anger, when acknowledged and expressed healthily, can be a powerful force for change. Fear, when understood, can lead to growth and greater wisdom. Shame, when confronted, can become the fuel for healing and self-compassion. The shadow is not something we must erase. It is something we must embrace and learn to integrate into our lives. By confronting our shadow, we begin to see the truth of who we are. We stop being controlled by unconscious forces, and we stop seeing our flaws as something to be ashamed of. We realize that these flaws are not weaknesses, but parts of our journey. They are aspects of our personality that, when integrated, can lead us to greater self-understanding. The shadow, in this sense, is not something that diminishes us. It is the key to our wholeness. By accepting all parts of ourselves, the light and the dark, we gain a fuller understanding of who we truly are, and we become more whole, more authentic, more empowered. This journey of confronting the shadow is not easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to face parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. But it is in this act of confrontation that we find the true freedom we seek. We stop living in denial, we stop living in fear, and we start living with a greater sense of purpose and clarity. As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, what parts of myself have I been avoiding? What emotions, desires, or traits have I pushed away because they do not fit the image of who I think I should be? What would happen if I allowed myself to fully embrace them? If I allowed myself to confront my shadow instead of hiding from it? The freedom we seek does not come from running away from our darkness, but from stepping into it, understanding it, and integrating it into our whole being. The shadow, once embraced, becomes a source of power, wisdom, and authenticity. It is only through this confrontation that we can truly be free, not from the shadow itself, but from the unconscious patterns it creates in our lives. And in this freedom, we find the peace, clarity, and empowerment we have long been seeking. So step into your shadow, don't fear it, welcome it, for it is through this very darkness that your light will shine the brightest. Loneliness is a strange companion, one that we often try to avoid at all costs. In a world that glorifies connection, where social interactions and external validation are the currency of our self-worth, loneliness can feel like a curse, a punishment. We fear it, we try to fill the emptiness it creates with distractions, with relationships, with noise. But what if I told you that loneliness, in its purest, most profound form, is not something to fear, but something to embrace? What if loneliness is not a void, but a space of transformation, a necessary stage on the path toward true self-realization? The truth is that loneliness, when understood as a part of the human experience, holds a power unlike any other. It is in solitude that we have the opportunity to strip away the layers of societal expectations, the masks we wear to fit in, and the roles we play to gain approval. It is in loneliness that we can finally hear our own voice, feel our own heartbeat, and confront the deepest truths about who we are. It is here, in the stillness of our own company, that we can begin the work of individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, beyond the influences of family, culture, and society. Carl Jung, the father of depth psychology, believed that individuation is the journey toward the integration of the unconscious and conscious parts of the self. This process requires us to confront not only the darkness within us, but also to accept the parts of ourselves that have been shaped by external forces. To do this, we must first separate ourselves from the distractions and expectations of the world around us. And it is in loneliness, in solitude, that we find the space to do this. Loneliness, in this sense, becomes a powerful tool for self-discovery. It is not a punishment, it is a gift, a sacred time for us to explore our innermost desires, fears, and dreams without the interference of others' opinions. Standing alone allows us to break free from the societal molds we have been shaped to fit into, and to begin the journey of uncovering the true self beneath all the external layers. It is in solitude that we begin to understand what is truly ours, not what has been handed to us by others. But the discomfort of loneliness is real. We are social creatures, after all, and the need for connection is deeply ingrained in us. We often feel lonely because we are disconnected from others, from the world, and sometimes even from ourselves. But perhaps this disconnection is not a failure, but a necessary part of the journey. Perhaps it is in these moments of isolation that we are called to reconnect with the most important relationship of all, the one we have with ourselves. In moments of loneliness, we are forced to look inward, to face the silence that surrounds us. It is in this silence that the truth emerges. We are no longer distracted by the opinions and judgments of others. We are no longer seeking validation from the outside world. We are left with nothing but ourselves, and in that raw, unfiltered space, we have the opportunity to rediscover our authentic self. This rediscovery is not always easy. Loneliness can be painful, uncomfortable, and deeply unsettling. It brings us face to face with parts of ourselves we have long ignored, parts we have perhaps feared. But this confrontation is necessary. It is only when we stand alone, truly alone, that we can begin to shed the false identities we have created and embrace who we really are. There is a profound beauty in this solitude. It is in these moments that we can connect to the depths of our own being. We begin to see that loneliness is not about the absence of others, but about the presence of our true selves. It is not a state of emptiness, but a fertile ground for growth, for transformation, for the blossoming of our authentic selves. Jung believed that individuation is a process that requires us to face the aspects of ourselves we have hidden away, and sometimes the only way to do this is through solitude. It is in the quiet, in the stillness, that we are able to hear our inner voice, the voice that has been drowned out by the noise of society, by the expectations of others, and by the distractions of the world. Loneliness then becomes a necessary part of this process. It is the time we need to reflect, to heal, and to realign ourselves with our true purpose. So, when loneliness arises, do not fear it. Do not see it as a void to be filled. Instead, see it as an invitation to step away from the world, to turn inward, and to reconnect with the essence of who you truly are. In this solitude, you will find the space to breathe, to reflect, and to grow. You will uncover the layers of yourself that have been buried beneath the noise, and you will emerge with a deeper understanding of who you are, what you desire, and what you are capable of becoming. Loneliness is not a punishment. It is the key to unlocking your true self. So, embrace it. Stand alone, not with sadness or resignation, but with the quiet confidence that in this solitude, you are finding your way home to yourself. The journey of individuation begins in the silence, in the solitude, and it is only through this journey that we can experience the freedom and growth we seek. In a world that thrives on noise, on the ceaseless chatter of opinions and voices, silence has become a rarity, a forgotten art. We are taught from a young age that to speak is to be heard, to assert ourselves, to be seen. The louder we speak, the more we are noticed, the more influence we wield. We often equate noise with power, believing that in our words lies our strength. But what if, in the very act of speaking, we have missed the true source of power, one that does not need to shout, one that does not need to dominate through words? Friedrich Nietzsche, in his exploration of the will to power, understood that true strength does not lie in the act of imposing oneself on others through forceful speech or behavior. Power, as he saw it, is the ability to control the flow of events, to master oneself, and to influence the world without the need for external validation. Silence, in this context, is not a weakness. It is a weapon, a tool for those who understand the deeper currents of human interaction, those who have learned the strength that lies in restraint. To remain silent is to reclaim control. In a society that values constant communication, that demands opinions, responses, and reactions at every turn, the one who can remain quiet, the one who can choose when to speak, holds a subtle but undeniable power. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is the presence of choice. It is the ability to decide when to reveal oneself, when to withhold, and when to listen. By mastering silence, we reclaim our ability to influence without speaking a word. This is not to suggest that silence is the answer to every situation. Silence does not mean withdrawal or passivity. It is not about being silent out of fear or insecurity. Rather, silence, when used strategically, becomes a tool of immense power. It is about understanding the timing of words, knowing when to step back and observe, when to let the silence create tension, when to allow the space between words to speak louder than the words themselves. Think about the last time you found yourself in a heated conversation or argument. How often did you feel the compulsion to speak, to defend, to assert your position? How often did your words come not from a place of strength, but from a place of reaction, of wanting to be heard, to prove that you were right? Nietzsche's idea of the will to power calls us to rise above this reactive mode of existence. It asks us to realize that true strength lies not in constantly proving ourselves, but in knowing when we do not need to speak at all. Strategic silence is an act of mastery. It forces others to reveal more about themselves, to fill the space with their own thoughts, their own insecurities. It gives us the opportunity to listen deeply, to observe, to understand the underlying dynamics of a situation. Silence allows us to hold the space, to control the flow of energy in a conversation, a negotiation, or an interaction. It is the opposite of the desperate need for validation through constant dialogue. It is a subtle assertion of presence. In many ways, strategic silence is an expression of self-mastery. It is the ability to resist the urge to dominate through words and instead choose to influence from a place of calm, of inner strength. It is a refusal to be swept away by the tides of external noise. By remaining silent, we create the space to listen, to reflect, and to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. This is the art of control, not through aggression, not through loud words, but through the quiet confidence of knowing when to speak and when to hold back. Consider the most influential figures in history, the great leaders, philosophers, and thinkers. What made them powerful was not only what they said, but also what they did not say. Their ability to remain silent in moments of tension, to withhold judgment and response, often allowed them to shape the world around them without ever needing to shout. They understood that true power does not need to be loud. It does not need to be aggressive. It simply needs to be present. Silence, when wielded with intention, allows us to observe and understand the world on a deeper level. It gives us the opportunity to tune into our own thoughts, to connect with our inner wisdom, and to let that wisdom guide our actions. In the end, silence is not an absence. It is a powerful, conscious choice to engage with the world on our own terms, without being swept away by the current of endless words and opinions. So, I ask you, when was the last time you chose silence over speech? When did you last allow yourself the freedom to simply be, to listen, to observe, and to influence through your presence rather than your words? In a world that is constantly speaking, silence is the ultimate form of power. It is the space where influence is born, where true strength lies, not in the force of our speech, but in the mastery of when to remain silent.